Dun, 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 dun. We need another intro theme song. I'm not sure when we're going to be actually live, so I have to. Dun, 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 dun. Maybe we're already live? It's possible. Hello, everyone. Hello, and welcome to Sunkworks, episode 23. How hard can it be? We've gotten a little bit off track in this sub-series, the mini-series about creating a website. So let me explain how we got here. First, a word from our sponsors. This is the vCluster CLI. If you have never used vCluster before, what we're going to see today is a little bit of vCluster wizardry. So you might be a little bit uncomfortable with terms like cluster API if you're not super familiar with these tools. I'm going to show you a few things that might worry you. If you're an open source maintainer, you're probably not worried by this doesn't look too worrying, right? Someone opened a issue that says, I think this project is deprecated. And someone else said, I don't know if it is. And that's as far as the discussion went. But that might also be something that you worry about. I don't know. There hasn't been a new version of vCluster in a while. And I suspect that there's a strategic reason for this, but I don't want to hamstring anybody. vCluster. I'm sorry, I have a message here. Someone is trying to get my attention. I'm just going to keep rolling here. So, if that's you, hey Christian, I don't think anyone's watching right now, so I don't think Christian is on the stream either. But so the impact. What is the impact of this failure to upgrade the cluster API provider, right? If you've ever used vCluster, you probably didn't use the cluster API provider. You may not even know what it is or why it's deprecated. And or if it's deprecated after what we've seen, it's really not even clear. If we follow this link, we'll go to this discussion here where it looks like we've had some debate about whether the current version can be used or not. And this is the thing I want you all to see. If you have defined a vCluster in Cluster API, it looks a little bit sort of like this. And what you really need to know about vCluster is that it's Helm under the hood. So if you can upgrade the Helm chart a different way, then you might not need a Cluster API cluster provider anymore. So put a pin in that. Just put a pin in that for now. We'll come back to that idea later. But there are multiple places in the config file where you may need to update something. And what I would like to show you is a set of vClusters that can be rebooted without failure. They should be so what you need to know about these vCluster CLI here, instead of just listing name and namespace, it also lists cluster. So this is the cluster, the host cluster that holds these four vClusters. And this cluster is a bare metal cluster that runs over there on a shelf in my office. That's just a couple of x86 nodes. They're x64 nodes, really. Okay, so you can see the nodes here. There's a few of them. One of them's actually under my desk. And what I noticed is anytime I reboot these nodes, everything comes back up, but due to a strange configuration of coredns that invokes an image with the latest tag, so there's some undefined behavior evoked by that when you use the latest tag. You should never use the latest tag, but I didn't write this Helm chart, so I don't really have control over what coredns they invoke without going way deeper into the config than I actually want to. I just want to use the cluster vcluster to deploy more vclusters, right, and just have free reign over all of them. That's what I want. So I've got my management cluster, and then we've got these clusters here, which actually run their own instance of cluster API inside. We need to have multiple instances of cluster API so that we can develop cluster API. Bottom line, if you don't have the capacity to deploy multiple instances of the cluster API provider, then you cannot develop cluster API provider ipso facto. So I suspect that is one of the reasons why this has not moved forward, because there's probably a very short list of those people who can do that. But we'll see if we can get there in a couple of episodes. I think that might be actually better for us than to just deploy a website. We can still deploy a website, and I would like to show how we use the pass-through capabilities to deploy a website without deploying redundant infrastructure, because redundant infrastructure is something that doesn't captivate me, and I don't want to have it if I don't need it, right? I'd like to have one Prometheus, one ingress, at least one ingress of each class. I might need multiple ingress classes, one metal LB if I have to have a metal LB to create load balancers on my cluster, right? I don't want multiple instances of these things, because then they have to be each configured separately, and the configurations can diverge, and that's just a nightmare waiting to happen. So I don't ever want to do that if I can avoid it. So we're going to seek to limit the number of deployments of each type of infrastructure. That will be a pattern that we'll exercise, and vCluster will make that pretty easy for us, I predict. All right, so what we've done is we forced this cluster past the last supported release. If we look in here somewhere, there's a mention of which is the latest version that you can update to. And we've got these cluster API definitions in Git, but we're not using GitOps to deploy them. So we can play a little fast and loose here. We can do a Helm upgrade if we want, and have the expectation that nothing is going to come by and put it back. That's what we would probably expect if we were using GitOps for everything. We need to update the definition in Git then. And we can't just update the definition in Git, because I'm not sure if we saw the comment about it here, but yeah, here we go. Maximum Kubernetes version fix 2. So there's a limit to which chart version you can upgrade to, and I guess it will just block you from upgrading past that. How can I know which is the latest supported Kubernetes version, which chart is compatible? Here we go. So Helm upgrade version. So this is what actually gets run in the provider, right? So we're not doing any worse than the provider itself, I think. Hopefully the provider isn't going to set us back based on the definition in the cluster. I haven't seen it do that yet anyway. Okay, so we're gonna take a look at the definitions of these clusters. They're all defined here together, and there are a few that aren't in the cluster. We're just going to blow them up real big here and compare them to each other. Since this one invokes the version here that it says you must not invoke, and it doesn't set a chart version. So you want to see these all normalized to have basically the same shape. They may not have the same configuration. There may be differences. There may be differences in multiple places, but we're going to take a look here and see if we can normalize them a bit. Right, so we can see these two are pretty much identical. This one defines the namespace and this one does not, but that's okay. We don't need to normalize that. They both define Kubernetes version 127. This one sets enable scheduler, and it has a different setting for persistent volumes and ingresses. That may turn out to be important later. And then they have different TLS SANs, right? Because they have different control planes, so they're reachable at a different name, each of them. And they both use the same OIDC issuer, so we can get one kube config that will log us into both at the same time. We just get a token that shows the group claims. And hopefully our group claims includes a group that gives us access to the cluster via RBAC. Then we can get in. That's how this works. Okay. So we've got this one as well. Alright, we see there's a little bit of a difference here, but these both don't define a namespace. They both go into a namespace that must be defined somewhere else, or maybe it was already defined. I remember why I did that. If the namespace is in this file, then the namespace might be garbage collected if this file gets deleted. That's what I was trying to avoid, because if the namespace is garbage collected, then the load balancer is also garbage collected, and then we have to manage load balancer IP addresses somehow, which I'm not prepared to do. Okay, so here we've got 127, 128. We've got an image set, and we've got a chart version. This is different than what we saw before. We're going to open up some new windows here so we can compare all these at the same time. Alright, great. So we can see that these both are missing the section that invokes a chart version. And I'm just going to put it in there because I don't want it to get superseded. So this is invalid, as we know from reading the docs there, from reading the... so the cluster API provider itself won't... Alright, and we want to pick Kubernetes version. Let's see what's the latest version. We've got another file that will tell us. That's not it. Yeah, here we go. 128.5.1 is the latest version. So that's what we're going to upgrade everything to right now. And there's a thing that when we actually create these clusters through Weave GitOps, the thing that changes is we don't have to keep these versions in sync ourselves. So we need to know that this says 128 if that says 128. That's what we want. We want these to all be aligned. They don't have to match each other, but they should match the latest patch version here, and we're actually not picking the latest patch version, are we? We want 127, what did we say? 128.5, right. Great, so we're knocking some diffs out here. So these clusters have some difference between them. Not exactly sure why. No one's really managing this. I take full responsibility. This is only a subset of the clusters anyway. These are the ones that are hosted outside of weave-GitOps. So we run our weave-GitOps instance on one of these clusters, and then inside that cluster there's another cluster API provider that has the same issue, and in order to upgrade those clusters, we'll have to do something else. We're just going to focus on these 4 ones today. We want to see that vcluster list. We want to see all these at 1.0.17.1 today. That's what we're aiming for. And the reason for that is because if we reboot the cluster, then these clusters are going to fail. What we'll do when we're done is we'll reboot the cluster, and we'll see how the clusters inside of weave-GitOps fail. Then we'll come back and we'll fix them, I guess. We can fix them as well. I think that will work. Yeah, I think we have time for that today. Why not? Just need to check in on my who's trying to reach me in case it's important. Get on a stream and suddenly everybody wants to reach you. Okay, so I did this manually at some point here, and I'm going to commit this stuff to Git before I forget. Alright, so 128.5, and we've got the vcluster chart definition and version 128, 128, 128.5. That all looks great. What about, yeah. So what happens now when we apply this definition in the cluster? Here we'll apply the staging file first. So you can see that it doesn't actually work here. Yeah, so what we're going to see is if we switch to this namespace, sorry, it's this namespace. So what we should see, this might not be the right pod container. What did it say? The logs here go all the way up. So there's a sinker pod, but I don't think that's the right pod. Let's see. Timeout or abort while handling. How long has that been failing? Longer than we've been at this. Every 30 seconds, huh? That's very interesting. I have no idea what these errors are. If I wasn't uncomfortable before, I certainly am now. All right. So we're just going to go ahead and apply all the definitions now, because we know that it doesn't have any effect. Or at least we suspect it doesn't have any effect. It didn't seem to have any effect. Okay. Kind of looks like those were kubectl created instead of applied before. I'm not sure if I should be doing this. And then this is the big one here. Get that out of the screen. All right. So I think I actually have a Helm upgrade. Yeah, great. Cool. So I think I made that test.yaml file. Okay, so since we have 4 different cluster definitions, we want to have 4 of these files. We're not using those. We're going to keep that test file around for reference because it worked before. That's what I'm showing you, something that worked before. So we're going to upgrade each of these using Helm. We're going to take the existing values and we're just going to upgrade over. And we might not actually need a values.yaml file to do this. I think we can just well, I think we do need the values.yaml file because we know that the vCluster provider isn't processing the upgrade. I'm not sure if we should see that error that we saw, that it doesn't match, but I don't see that error. I think this is the control plane. I don't know if it's going to find our change at all, or where that comes from. Oh, I know where to go. kubens. We want to look at the provider. Yeah, okay. Here's our controller manager. And it's probably spewing out a ton of errors now, right? All these upgrades not working. Great. Upgrade failed. Parse error. Unclosed action. Yeah, so this is the error. This is the error that needs to be resolved if people are going to use the vCluster provider with the latest version. But we don't actually have to. We don't have to accommodate that. We can just. Let's see. Are we looking at errors from the one that already upgraded? That's what I'd really like to see. Or does this get us past the issue? Like we've done the handoff and now we don't actually have this problem anymore? That would be ideal. That would be ideal. Yeah, so what we're dealing with here is something very sneaky. And what I mean by sneaky is there's something happening in this cluster that's stateful. and if the stateful thing fails, for whatever reason, and it's so happens this is a easily predictable reason when you do this upgrade, it would consistently fail this way. You can no longer rely on the state of the cluster to converge, I guess. So that's how I would say what's happening here. So if we can do the upgrade and get it past that, then it should just see, oh, okay, the upgrade's been done, and it should stop. And I think I don't see any errors. Well, here's an error for the Mu cluster. Error, upgrade failed. Parsed unclosed action. Yeah, but how long ago was that? Well, not exactly clear. Yeah, see, it is trying to downgrade us. So we'll actually have to stop using the vCluster provider unless we can fix this. But it doesn't seem to have any impact. There might be a performance impact. I have a feeling all these failed upgrades have a major impact on performance. I think that's probably what we'll find out if we fix this error, that all of our machines magically get a bunch of load average reduced and they're not idle cycling all the time anymore. That would be pretty fantastic if we could stop all that work. This is just waste. It just represents waste. It's trying to upgrade to a version that it's a downgrade. And it's against our wishes. So we should be able to fix that. I think we can probably fix that, but we're just going to do the upgrade manually for now, because what we really want to see is that we can reboot. This is a issue of mastery of kit here, okay? Because I can see that this provider is not being maintained, and that gives me a slight disincentive to use it and to promote it. But if I find that it's actually still useful, right? I didn't have a problem with this until I tried to upgrade to the very latest version. It actually worked really well for me the entire time until I tried to reboot, and then I had a problem. So this is ideal. These are the ideal conditions for your dev environment. You want it to fail when someone reboots it. And I'm saying something a little bit unconventional here. I'm saying you need there to be some kind of a failure condition in your dev environment, so that when the responsible person hasn't come along in a while, the whole thing shuts down. That's what you want. Because who knows what state it's in if that person is gone. And this is something that's unconventional, and this may go against certain departmental policies. If you work for a company, I wouldn't recommend writing this in your policy. But you want to have these kind of fail-safe switches so that when someone isn't maintaining the thing, and no one who knows how the thing works has come along in a while to check if the thing is still working as it's supposed to work, it should not just work. It should not just work indefinitely, forever. You need someone who knows how the thing works on the payroll so that the thing can go on working indefinitely, and that's non-negotiable. So so we're going to do this upgrade, and we're just going to take a little bit of time to get these files right, because this is kind of an unconventional thing, and I don't think that we're going to have to do this every day. But that's actually the point. Alright, so we're going to do this upgrade 4 times, and then we're going to see the upgrade reflected in the vCluster CLI, and we're going to be satisfied with that, because once we reboot the cluster, we'll be able to see the impact of what happens on each cluster that has the fix versus the cluster that doesn't have the fix. So what you should know is all of the clusters inside of the Howard Moonboo space cluster are not going to get the fix. So those clusters, when we reboot, they will have an issue. But the clusters on the outside, and Howard Moonboo himself, will all have the fix. So those clusters will not experience an outage of coredns, which is the root cause of all of the other issues that I was having. So this is the only reason that I'm really interested in upgrading the vcluster-capi provider today, because it doesn't allow you to upgrade your chart past, I'm not sure what version is the top version you can select, but there's a fix somewhere near this latest version of the vCluster chart that you need if you want that coredns thing to work correctly. So I just want to apply it manually everywhere, and then we'll let the vcluster-capi provider be out of sync, and we'll have what's called blessed clusters. Okay, a blessed cluster is not a dev environment. A blessed cluster is a cluster that we trust to not go down, and that's the cluster that the responsible person has inspected and, you know, waved their hands over and said, this cluster is infrastructure, so it should remain online, and it should survive a reboot. That's what we're doing here. So we're drawing the line between clusters that can fail and that will have a flashing light on the dashboard that may have some impact when they're rebooted. We'll have a flashing light that someone needs to come by and resolve. And I actually think there might be some value in leaving it this way. I think again, this is not a statement of policy here. I don't think that we should necessarily leave the vcluster-capi provider in the state that it's in. I do think that we should allow vCluster charts to be upgraded to the latest version that's available, and we should fix the Capi provider to handle that however that's necessary. I'm volunteering for it right now. I have no choice but to do it myself because it doesn't appear anyone else is doing it. So we're going to have to run vCluster Capi provider in a dev environment. So yeah, that's right. So not only are we going to run it in GitOps Enterprise, we're going to go one level deeper. We're going to have vcluster-in-vcluster. And then we're going to figure out if we can shut off those environments progressively as we see that they're not in use. And we're going to have some discussion about how we can detect if they're in use or not. I think that will be a very interesting thread to pull on. We may not want to shut down all the environments based on detected usage, but that is something that vClusters and Loft always sort of promised, and I'm not sure how effectively it was delivered in the actual user experience, that the clusters can just be turned off when they're not in use. I know you can go in and suspend the cluster through the UI, but I have no idea if we can talk about that when we get there. We're focused on one thing here. We have to get this done. We just have to upgrade these 4 clusters, which means we have to capture the values. We know the chart version as the only other information, and the values go into a file for each cluster. And if you're a new Vim user and you want to know how did I do this here, it's Control V, I think. Control V. Yeah, you can select a block here, and then you can go to the end of the line with a $sign. And we're copying each of these individually because they definitely have personality. Each of them has a slight variation in how they're configured. We're not going to go into detail about how that is, but we are going to normalize the versions. So they're all at least on the latest version. That's what I would like. One thing I want to note here, you notice these are pinned to different nodes. So we've got a node HP1. When that node reboots, we should see the Moonboo staging cluster go down. And we've got a node MSI Gaming. When that reboots, we should see Howard Moonboo Space go down. All right, and if this change is successful, when Howard Moonboo Space goes down, it should come back up. Everything should be fine. coredns, to my knowledge, is the only thing that causes an issue. We had Harbor, that was causing an issue when coredns was failing because Harbor itself needs to be accessible. I think there's a reason why. I'm not sure I'm stating it correctly, but okay. So we've got those files. We've got one more now. I think we've got to have this file. And this one is also pinned to MSI Gaming. So this is the heavy hitter node. When this node goes down, a lot of stuff goes down because not only is Howard Moonboo Space hosted here, but all of the child clusters of Howard Moonboo Space are probably hosted here by default. I'm not sure if that's how it works. I'm not actually sure if that's how it works. All right, so we did Helm upgrade like that. We're going to look at how did this work. We want to be in the namespace of the cluster to upgrade. So we'll upgrade Heavy Stage first. This is the canary number 1. We don't need that test.yaml anymore. Excuse me. Alright, so we've got it here in this namespace that we're in, and we want dash dash values from, I guess the file was values, heavy stage. Yeah, okay. Okay, so that cluster is upgrading right now. Terminating, pending, init. Running. Deus builder is failing health checks. Pod initializing error. Okay, this is not correct. Something is wrong. What is wrong? Flag provided but not defined cube API server arg. Okay, we have broken something. We shouldn't have dumped that test.yaml file. Well, cube API server arg, OIDC issuer URL, component K3s. Are we not? We got to compare this to the other one, I guess. Alright, we've just entered the funnest part of the show now, where we get to see, easy, GG easy. Okay. All of these need to change just ever so slightly. If you're not aware, the best part of the show is where I don't know what's wrong and we have to fix it live, or look like a big banana head. That is what that is which part of the show we've entered. We're going to try that upgrade one more time, and this time it's going to work. Yeah, we've got some impact now. Heavy stage is not happy. It is not happy at this time. It is not happy. We have upgraded heavy stage. It should be responding with a new pod relatively quickly, but I don't see anything happening now. Still an error, crash, look back off. I don't know if that's going to work. I honestly don't know. I think what's happening is we've got a new config, but it hasn't hit the cluster yet. And we're waiting to see the pod, the impact on the pod. Yeah, it's up and running now. That's great. Okay. Whew. Great. I don't want to look like a big banana head. All right, let's do the other upgrades now. Howard Moonboo stage here. And if you want to see what's wrong here, you can see what's wrong across the cluster. These things will come back in a minute. That's the impact that we just created. But those things will recover as soon as coredns is back. There's no problem now. I think we'll probably need to come back in a minute to see that. But we're going to, in the meantime, we're going to do helm upgrade. We're going to do the same upgrade here, and we're going to do the same upgrade here. Stage and space. Address him by his middle name, by his given name, Howard Mumbu. And what we should see any moment now is all of these clusters are fine. And they've upgraded. And then what we can do is we can roll all the nodes and we'll see the impact on the downstream clusters of a reboot. But these clusters will all be fine. That is my prediction, because they've been upgraded. So the vcluster-capi provider, we should look at his logs now to see how he's coping with being out of control. Hopefully everything's fine there. Probably he's got a lot of errors in the logs, and we can just cope with those. Upgrade failed. So it's trying to upgrade some things still, but it's running into parse error. And I'm not sure why it runs into parse error. I have to assume they're on strike though. Otherwise this thing would either be end-of-lifed or maintained. I'm not sure how you wind up in the space in between where it's just adrift for years. It's probably a strategic move. People can still come in through this door and they have problems converting to customers, right? Is that how it works? I think so. I think that's legit. I actually think that's okay. I'm not gonna cry foul about that. I think that if you come in here and you find that the open source is so useful that you can't live without the maintainers working on it, then you should probably buy whatever they're selling. Hopefully what they're selling is any good. That's the rub. I don't know. I've never used vCluster Pro, but I would try it out if they sent me some credits or something. I think I would try it out. But I don't know if I need it, right? It doesn't seem like I need it if this thing works the way it is advertised. I can't really tell if it's working anymore or if it gave up installing, but it's error executing Helm upgrade, so it's not going to go any further. It's not going to do anything. We could turn off the Capi provider at this point and it would be okay. It would be a net savings in resources. I think that would be okay. We know how to manage the vCluster chart by hand now. That thing could go in a Helm release and it would be the same effect. We would save ourselves a couple of CRDs. I don't know if it would work with Weave GitOps anymore, Weave GitOps Enterprise, but that would probably be the biggest drawback. So anyway, these handles, I think these handles still work in all the tools that depend on Cluster API, right? They'll pass request through from whoever needs it to the cluster. If that's how that, I'm not really sure how that works. Who uses Cluster API in the room? Anyway, I don't see errors coming out anymore. I think it's okay now. In fact, we're going to restart that guy and see how it looks after the restart too. Attempting to acquire lead or lease. All right, we'll come back and see if there's errors in the logs later. So how do we orchestrate a reboot across all nodes? If we want to reboot all nodes safely, it's actually really easy. Use QRead. It's another CNCF project. QRead.dev stands for Kubernetes Reboot Daemon. And I have a little alias here that shows me a hint on how you get the nodes to restart. You touch a file on each node. So we're going to touch that file on each node, starting with the master, the control plane of the management cluster. Usually when I do this, I'm actually upgrading the nodes, but I just upgraded them yesterday, so I don't need to do that today. And then we'll go to HP1. And we'll touch that guy's reboot required file. And we've got that other node, MSI Gaming. Yeah, you see I just upgraded all of these nodes yesterday, so they've already been rebooted recently. And how do we know what's going up and what's going down? We can use our situational awareness with a few of these tools here. So we see some things are happening already. Definitely got some things happening. Looks like something's going down. Something's going down. Here. So depending on what's going down, it's the node we touched first. That's good. When the control plane node goes down, oh, that was the one we touched first, actually. Yeah, it's fairly random what order they reboot in, but they will reboot one at a time in an orderly fashion. And if one node doesn't come back, the others aren't just going to run away and reboot while we're waiting for a node to come back. That's the nice feature of QRead. It's really a pretty simple tool, but in implementation it's a bit tricky because you don't want just anybody to be able to reboot the nodes, right? So we can see this one is down now. It's in reboot. We can ping it if we want to confirm that. Might actually have just come back up as we were pinging. Yeah, it did. Look at that. So I bet that will be the next node to go down. I think it's probably going to reboot itself. And at that point, we'll lose touch with the management control plane. But the workloads will keep running on all of the nodes other than the one that's rebooting. So that's something you can take advantage of, depending on how you have your cluster set up. That might be outage event, or it might not. I don't have a redundant control plane here in the typical sense that the control plane itself has multiple masters, and if a master goes down, another one will just pick up the leader and take over. I don't have Raft implemented like that with shared consensus, but that's for another episode. Okay, so the node came back and it's been added back to the pool. So things that were stopped are starting again. That's what we're seeing now. And you see the node is waffling a little bit because it's got a load now. Yeah, we see some of these pods coming back up, the pods. And some of these pods are going to have problems, right? Here's our latest tag used in coredns. That's the problem. That is one problem. And we see lots of stuff failing as a result of failure of coredns. So we're going to look at which clusters. We're going to look at how do we handle this in a one-off fashion when we don't wish to bless the cluster. If we just want to say, oh, it's a dev environment. Yes, it's been restarted. Now, the devs can use it with my permission. That is what we're about to do. But we have to wait for the nodes to all reboot first. So the nodes are going to all reboot. I'm going to take a little breather. I'm going to go for a walk, and I'll be back when the nodes are done rebooting. Hopefully everything goes okay. We're going to see some errors, but I don't know. I don't know if I'm reaching anybody or if I'm just talking to myself. I think that's what's really happening. I don't know if you can hear the pings. Pings come through the monitor, and the monitor audio is off, but you might be able to hear them through the microphone. Oh, I hear somebody rebooting now. There we go. I heard it. That was the telltale sound of a reboot. Maybe you could hear it on the background. Coming back online now. So here's a problem. When the OIDC service DEX is down, we cannot validate our tokens. So we have to cross our fingers that DEX actually comes back up. Or we may need to dial into the management node to fix it. And I think that DEX comes back up now because of what we just did. I think that the Howard Mumbu Space Cluster that runs DEX has a valid coredns pod that just came online. And as soon as that pod is ready, DEX can begin again. There's DEX in my notifications. It's still down. Here we'll see the same things I'm looking at together. This one was DEX. It says it's unhealthy. But it's actually healthy now, so that's good. Anybody seen BotCube before? Isn't that nice? So we're probably having a problem with the ingress now. There's a chance the ingress is not ready. So otherwise we would be reaching that healthy DEX pod right now, I'm pretty sure. But we're not, unless something else is wrong. Lots of things appear to be wrong, but Howard Space is a ready pod. Oh. Alright, our control plane is back. We got one more node to reboot still. That's the big one. So I'm going to go away for a minute, and it's going to reboot. I'm going to come back. It's going to be fine. Hopefully. And then we're going to fix all of the loose ends. All of the dev clusters that have yet to be blessed. That's where we're going. Looks like it's almost ready. Okay, we're starting to get some errors from Prometheus. This is the second place we can check. We need Tailscale. Hopefully this doesn't interrupt our stream. We're going to connect to Tailscale. Still streaming? It looks like we're still streaming. It does look like we're still streaming. And here's Prometheus. All right, Alert Manager, Cube Aggregated API down. I think those are transient errors that will come and go. What will not come and go are the errors on the child clusters. So let's see what's wrong right now. Probably a long list of things. Plenty of things wrong until that node comes back. No shortage of things at all wrong. Tons of things, in fact. Entire blog is down. That's a travesty. Looks like things are starting to come back. We're waiting to see Dex come back online. So that will be the signal that we can switch to another cluster to see what's wrong with that cluster. Because there are some clusters, like we said, that we did not upgrade yet with coredns configurations that will not survive this reboot. But this one is okay. That's great news. Howard Moonbu cluster is running coredns, which is why things are going to start coming back real quick now. Except for the ones that won't. So here, these four: BotCube Demo, Cluster 02, Limnos Central, and Cluster 01. All of these are not going to come back on their own, and we're going to have to do something. And that is... them's the breaks. So like I said, these are cluster within a cluster, so I am not going to bless them as production clusters under any circumstances, because they are cluster within cluster, and they have the potential to be pinned to a node instead of spreading across all available nodes. I want every blessed cluster to be tested in cases of node outages. I should be able to survive the loss of any one node without losing services in production. This is my decree. That is policy statement there. Okay. That's what we would say if we were aiming for highly available status. That's what I'm gonna say. Okay, so we're not. These are all dev environments, so we're just gonna say, oh, there's our crashing coredns just where we expected it. And how are we going to fix it? We're going to give it extra permissions because it should be able to bind port 53. That's what it needs. And it's not permitted to do that by the old version of the vcluster-capi chart. I think. I don't know. I know how to fix this error. That's what we're going to do real quick. Because production is down. No, it can't be production. If I'm doing this because production is down, we made a mistake. This is not a blessed cluster, right? All right, and what is in this patch? Here. We're actually allowing privilege escalation, but only for netbind service. So if any new capabilities get added to the capabilities model, then we'd be hosed because we're only dropping the capabilities that are listed. But I think that is okay as a workaround in dev. And it is less likely to cause me a problem than if you run a production service on a non-blessed cluster. That would cause me a problem. I believe that would be a way for me to wind up having a bad day as a sysadmin. So and I know I'm not having a bad day when these alerts go away. That's not supposed to rhyme. That's an indication that it's false, actually. I think that might be a true lie. All right, let's see. Have to run what's wrong and see what's wrong now. We know there's a few more clusters we have to do this to. Botcube demo. Cluster 01 and cluster 02. We shouldn't have to do this anywhere else. So we'll go back to the Howard Space cluster because all the problems should be in there. And we should see those problems winding down pretty quickly. Container status unknown. I've never seen that. It looks like we have a couple of stale pods. I don't know how that happens. That's very strange. We may have broken something. It looks like this is not pinned anymore. Was this node ever pinned? Yeah, I think we got more than we bargained for. I'm going to start deleting clusters now because I don't want to see these errors forever. Okay, if I'm in the limno central cluster, which is defined here in the test namespace, sorry, it is not defined itself. The workloads are defined in the test namespace, but the cluster is defined on the Howard Moonboost base cluster test namespace. Limno central has a definition here. Which does not pin to any node. So, because this cluster isn't blessed, does that mean it shouldn't be pinned to any node? I think this is okay. But I don't know what happened to this cluster. I think it should be upgraded, actually. Let's do K3S version 128.5. And I don't know if that has any effect. I honestly think that it sets it back to the lower version, and that's... I'm not sure how I ever would have missed that, though. Yeah, see. It can't be on the newer chart without a Helm upgrade. Okay, so we'll do the same thing here, but we're still not going to bless this cluster. We're just upgrading it. I don't want to commit this file, but I don't want to add a git ignore either. So I guess I'm going to create a customization.yaml in this directory. I don't think I should do that. Okay, we've done something wrong here. It looks like probably the same thing that hit all the other clusters. Yep, it sure is. Easy fix. don't know if that's correct, actually. Ever seen that command? Delete all pods in all namespaces. How do you live with yourself? Ugh. Sorry. I have to fill that up. It looks like everything came back okay. Alright, I think we can trust this one now. Not going to bless it. But we are going to look at the ones next to it and see if we can fix them in a similar way, because I don't want to keep a bad example around. And right now I feel like I'm being a bad example. I'm going to be right back. So we want to see is all these clusters survive in a reboot. They should all come back. I think it's possible. I don't think we need the whole blessing scheme. I think that's a little bit ridiculous for the scale that we're at. It might be good for someone who doesn't know what they're doing, but we know what we're doing. We want everything to work. Do we want the chart definition too? I think that's the thing that causes the error. I think we want to be on the upgraded chart. I think we do. We want the error so that it will. I'm going to leave that part out. I think all the rest of those are fixes. That means we gotta fix our templates as well. This is not the template that I'm looking for. So these are the templates that actually produce those cluster definitions. So if we were to delete those clusters and recreate them through the UI, this is how they would turn out, and this is where we need to make some adjustments, I think. So K0s does not work at all. So write that one off. We're not using that today. Here, this needs to be fixed. That looks better. And I think the rest of this stuff can stay the same. The only other thing that's wrong is we're not defining our load balancer. But I actually think it's an anti-pattern to define your load balancer in with the cluster template. I think it should be separate. And it is separate, so we're going to keep it that way. But we do need all these versions to match, right? The versions match. The versions are automatically upgraded by Flux. So we could remove some of these old unsupported versions, but I'm going to keep them around for legacy reasons because I think I might want to deploy an old unsupported cluster once in a while. If possible. I think that's a valuable configuration to keep. We might need it. Who knows? And we've got these bootstrap configs. These upgrade Flux automatically. But the cluster bootstrap controller will never upgrade Flux out from under you. From my understanding, a new cluster bootstrap config will only bootstrap if the match label is not present. So the presence of this label indicates the cluster's already been bootstrapped. And I don't think that a new cluster bootstrap config will cause it to bootstrap again. I think that would be outside of GitOps. I think that would be undesirable. Okay, and we've got a definition in each namespace where we expect clusters to appear that we want to bootstrap. So the definitions are all the same. Here, and we've got one for the special namespace. Remember that we said this will become important later. Why would we create the namespace out of band? For a reminder that we need to create a cluster bootstrap config for every namespace that we want to use with GitOps Enterprise. So we are still going to have to do something, right? We're going to have to do something about the chart version. We're going to leave the chart version out of the template, but we are going to go back to each cluster definition in the place where they're instantiated, and we're going to add a values file for each one. That's what we're going to do. And then we're just going to upgrade it, let it fly to the latest version of the chart, and let it be out of sync with. So this is not ideal. We should really fix the vcluster-capi provider, I think. But gonna just let it fly here. I think it'll be okay, because then we'll be able to reboot the cluster and see that they all come back. That's what I would like. And if there was an error, then we'll take a look and see what happened. But right now we can see we've upgraded one successfully in the test namespace, so we should be able to upgrade these as well. We'll leave as an exercise for the reader. How do you avoid writing values into the Helm release spec like this? I think we don't want to have values written in the spec here. I think this is undesirable, but it is how it works today. So we just duplicate the config, and if it should get out of sync, then we'll have a problem. That's why I don't want to commit these files, and also because they're not valid YAML. If I should try to kubectl apply this file, it will be an error. So I don't really want these files in my repo. We'll see. We'll see what we do here. I'm not sure we need to keep them. We can always create them later. They're just a thing to make sure that the upgrade goes through successfully. So as long as we're not upgrading our clusters, it doesn't matter. And there's no newer version upgrade to right now, so needn't worry about such things. They all look good, right? Something wrong with botcube demo. We don't want that. That should prompt a new pod to be created, unless it's in some kind of state where it won't recover. Alright, I think we should be able to reboot all the nodes now and see everything come back without an error. And this will be a great success. Without an error is too ambitious. There's going to be loads of errors, but by the end it's going to go away. That's what I predict. So we're just going to reboot all 3 nodes like we did before. Touch reboot required. Watch the nodes go down one by one, and as they come back, watch the what's wrong list to see if it all works itself out, and how long and how deep the error gets, because there will be some error, and it's going to be some kind of outage for sure. But it looks like everything came back this time. Okay, great. So I'm going to start with HP2. And then HP1. And then the big one. And they may not reboot in that order. And now this time we're going to talk to Looks like our stuff went down like right away. Yeah, it's the big one. Went first. Okay. Everything's going to come back up, though. It's going to be fine. Let's see what's wrong. Lots of pending pods. Inappropriate. All right, let's see. So if it seems like I'm beating a dead horse here, I want it to be clear. There is a goal, there's a purpose to this. We're actually making our it's a car alarm going off outside, I'm sorry. Hope everything's okay. Looks like the recycling truck might have jostled something a little bit. Recycling day is always fun when you have on-street parking. So this is the management cluster here, and the management cluster, like I said, doesn't have a redundant control plane. So we can't see the node status until HP2 comes back. And it's running on 1.23.16 because that's the last version that supported Docker, as far as I know. I think there's still a trick you can use with Mirantis Container Engine, but I haven't been able to figure it out. So I don't use that. I don't know why it says I'm unauthorized. That's very strange. So maybe it hasn't been able to contact the OIDC server, so it's not able to validate tokens. It's one of the things that I'm trying to avoid here. I have a process that I follow when I reboot all the nodes where the control plane gets reconfigured as part of this process, and it has to temporarily drop the OIDC in case it's down. Then the control plane won't start. And that doesn't seem to be what's happening right now. This is just a temporary failure, so it looks like everything's fine. All right, I'll be right back. HP1 is the database server. Mostly the database is run on that machine. I think that's correct. So I was a bit uneasy about the node pinning thing. If a cluster was pinned to a node before and it's not pinned anymore, that could be a problem. But hopefully we don't do that too much. There's a lot of databases on this cluster. It's not a great cluster, but it is a large cluster. It's certainly a useful cluster. Those databases, I would like it if we could do without those. But some of them are necessary. Hefty workflow, definitely important. Looks like things are coming back. We've still got some pending services from HP1, but the node is rebooted now, so it looks like it is on its way. What would be really great is if I could shut down one of these nodes, or all of them, and then keep the services online through some sort of fallback process. I don't think that I could shut them all down, but I should be able to shut one of them down. I should be able to shut one of them down, and then I should be able to shut a second one down, and still have one online, and then have core services, whatever that means, should remain online. But it would be ideal if that one that runs the core services is not fixed, so it could be any of them. Not the way that it's configured right now, where there's a control plane node and it's a single control plane node, and that's the node that gets the master label. So it's not really ideal configuration. Kind of sucks. But it's not like we're getting paid for this, so if you're interested in a highly available configuration, we could show that one as well. I doubt very much anyone's going to watch this. I have low self-confidence. If only because it's a numbered episode. And I have a track record of producing numbered episodes that no one watches. I'm going to continue doing that. I think it's good. It's good for me. I get to learn. I get to learn a lot. And I get to learn useful skills that I'll continue to apply in the future. This has been one of our longer episodes. It's almost 2 hours now. I'm going to get ready to call it quits in a minute. But I'm pretty sure that this is error is going to resolve before we're done. I'm not going to touch any more keys. I'm just going to watch. We're also watching BotCube spam us with errors. I think that's going to stop by the time we're done as well. We'll be done with errors for the day. All these things are going to come back online without any more work from me. Yeah, see, this one came back. Does look like things are coming back, doesn't it? Looks like only a few things still down now. Well, looks like it's been another successful episode of Sunkworks where we broke some stuff and then fixed most of it or almost all of it. I'm pretty sure the rest of these things are going to resolve themselves in a few seconds. They're all in crash loop back off, so we can't really tell for sure. But I think they will. Got about 30 seconds. I'm not sure if they're going to restart. They're going to retry again before. Right, I'm not sure. I'm just not sure. It looks like all the nodes are back. Yeah, the nodes are back. I know these are not going to fix themselves, so I'm just going to delete them to get them off the screen. And if you don't know why, it's a secret. Looks like we're in business, friends. Yeah, it took a little longer than I thought it would to reboot those 3 nodes, but they all rebooted and everything came back. I don't know about those patches. We might need to pull those patches out. I think that's what just happened. We saw coredns get patched over with an inferior coredns. That might be okay. I think it's good for today. All right. Thanks to anyone who stuck with us all the way to the end. Thanks. I didn't share that. See you later.